Yeah. Mantuta, Tanda di Casa, Toto, Miti Shijima, Najiceneta, Malara, Anichi, Nalecheto, Logicheva, Chibare. The day is done, Ani, Santo, State, certain Noson, La Combamana, Shonshu Manjapa, Lepa, Tony, Justice Dambala, Semba Chafi Lombas, Lava, Shinji Law, Sayajita, Miti Shijimi Tiki, or Dino Pata, and
mainly, we're learning about how to practice the stages of the path of the Lam Rim, according to how it's presented in this text, the foundation of all good qualities. This is what Geshe has been teaching on. We're dealing in particular with a verse found on page 18 in tab 4, the fourth one down, 3.5 as it were. Even if I develop only the mind of enlightenment, but I don't practice the 3 types of ethics, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva vows with great energy. So this verse teaches the practice of the 6 practices, let's say, like generosity and so forth.
Positive Naglos Semte, positive says on it. I did that Kunikunda Yajitango. That positive singing on it. Some also singing on it. Yasho the Gallery. Sonchu just says at it. Sonchu just says at it. Gallery Senat. And it's a little bit of something to come to Tabashan and we say, there is Tayagati Yama. They say Yasho.
We need to train ourselves in positive states of mind. So we cultivate positive states of mind. They arise, and in this way we go through this mental development. Now, the most positive mind there is called the mind of enlightenment. The mind of enlightenment is a mind that thinks that may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. There's no mind more positive than this one.
Okay. They are sure you Sanji Komo Togo and Songoy, that's on them. The Yasho Charlie Carre Manzo Sosolia Anichi Pen Dope and Dead Sanjaina. So Java Chen make it and Dodam, but besiege Sanjaina. So happened. Never go, Yambi. Anichi, Picha go, Yamison, Sono Yonkina. Then just Simple Chava Mappa. Those are not the sense of Tamjay tender. Do not drive cheddar. Yes, do not draw a shah and yombi. Each of the Sujuko Tobasha says, say, I should render the tigger.
This is not the best mind simply because it wishes to achieve Buddhahood. Yeah? Why is it the best mind then? Well, think about the attitude that it has to all sentient beings without exception. Yeah? It feels a certain way towards those sentient beings who benefit us and who help us. But not just them, also sentient beings that you have no particular relationship or connection to, like even the smallest insects. And even towards those beings who, from the very depths of their hearts, want to harm you, still, towards all of these beings, friend, foe, or stranger, the mind of enlightenment wants to free those beings, all of those beings from suffering. Because it has the wish to free all those beings from suffering without exception, it is the best mind. That's why it's the best.
Understand? Or say, I show you what take it down. They are Sawa and Shamba the Nijin, Konji Chani, only this had the chap.
That's why it's the best. And this mind, of course, becomes like it does because we have trained or because the person trains him or herself from the beginning in loving kindness and compassion.
Okay. Manzu Sanjay to compose that and Manzu Tapasha de Gore, Nije Tashamba. 아니 점바 타심바 말이 걸사 치라 타심바 아니 니바 타심바 치트 니스 타심바 치라 산제라고 알아 산제세 드니치레 마도 땅만도 넘비게 따바로 유고 산제들이 켈레메야 말해 산제세 아데 만도 노지체네 깔레 잡네 야 코르소 아니 연용도 산제로 같이 제일 좋게 드니치라 산제세요.
Geshe is always explaining what Buddhahood is. He describes it as a state of consummate wisdom, consummate compassion, and consummate ability. A Buddha is one who has developed these qualities of wisdom, compassion, and ability to their utmost extent. Right? That's what Buddhists understand as Buddha. And Buddhists don't understand a Buddha to be some, eternal or permanent, self-perfected being or naturally perfected being. Rather, some beings become Buddhas through drawing upon their own experience and developing to that point. If someone develops to that point, then they achieve or they attain the ability to effortlessly accomplish the welfare of countless beings. They have from their own side the ability to help many, many beings, numberless beings, at any given moment. So when you make the wish to achieve this state, you're making a wish to develop the ability to effortlessly help countless beings all at once. That's Buddhahood, and we also can have the thought that, oh, may I attain that? I mean, if there is such a state to be attained, it would be good to attain it, wouldn't it? There is indeed a state like that we can achieve, and the root of achieving that state lies in the mind of enlightenment. The mind of enlightenment is absolutely indispensable method for achieving the state of Buddha. Can you achieve Buddhahood just simply by developing that state, that mind, or simply through having that? No, you can't. That alone is not enough, which is why the verse says that even if I develop only the mind of enlightenment, but I don't practice the three types of ethics, I will not achieve enlightenment. The verse only mentions ethics, but in fact it's indicating we need to practice all six, not just ethics, but also generosity and so forth. But through developing the mind of enlightenment and practicing these six, you can achieve that state.
Yeah. Okay? Or two sketch area. Today it's a Tino and Jimba Sutra, and it's Zeva, Subote Shatter. Jimba Sutra, Zeva Subote and then Shatter, just to the colonel yard. The Shatter. That's Sendita. Sendita and the Tangamali and what a coach chamber. Inaya. There, now, Jimba Tade, Jibignole, Tsering, Sutrignole, Zevignole, only sorted to Shiragnole, to Zutite, Kuzho, Jimba, Lohanda, which Row and Yolicheta.
Yeah.
Sendi Sate, to Kangalia. Sendi Ketchesho, Marsignole, Karjanaya. Sendi Sate, a Messica Ketchambore. He's a positive, Jelmochega, Haleva, and Lorichamono, Susha Yovaita. That's the much as you can do to say your marriage. Then no teaching the thoughts you will just tuna something. The Tangamali and Gochi something. And Taritalia or those you don't Lord Chamo de not the Yoba and Maron roll my Nipa Jenny. I told Solki. She has so much time. How is it? Me Yad 이게 배지 지야 집어 말해. 근데 아직 또 메코노라고도 다들 만나와 주셔서 지르더라고요. 아니 저도 뭐 셔셔로 와. 저도 지금 병고 자리 내려고 못 된다. 근데 이나 알레 다들 산로야 걸어 디세 먹자. 디세 좋았다. 이제 일단 일로 주마서 이제 마 배지 되는 시가요. 일단 나도 예전에 또 스토브 안 못해 지다.
Of these 6 practices, we've covered the first 3 already. You've got generosity, ethics, the practice of generosity, the practice of ethics, and the practice of patience. So we have, the CDs and the tapes. It's all been recorded, so they're available for you. Now, these practices like generosity and ethics and patience and meditative stabilization and wisdom, each of them have their own level of practice. Their own individual stages that you follow in developing them and the way that you go about in practicing them. But joyous effort, the 4th, the one that we will be talking about today, and which Geshe introduced a bit 2 weeks ago, is extremely important, for it's involved in every single one of the others. Joyous effort is extremely important in that it is a facet or an important element to the practice of all the other 5 that we will cover. Now, generally speaking, no matter what practice it is that you're engaged in, joyous effort, or perseverance, if you will, is important. Now, Lama Tsongkhapa explains the practice of joyous effort in incredible detail, really amazing and wonderful teachings that he gives there. Of course, we won't have the time to go into the type of detail that Lama Tsongkhapa does, but Geshe thought that he would at least draw upon those teachings and then explain what he can to us. Now, it was Geshe-la's hope that he could have a read through the Lamrim Chenmo, Lama Tsongkhapa's work, and then relate to us what Lama Tsongkhapa, keep that in mind, and then relate to us what it is that Lama Tsongkhapa said. However, the thing is Geshe-la is not just teaching. At the moment he's seeing 4 different doctors. So it's not like we just had nothing to do and wandered down here, but actually Geshe-la had to go to the doctor before he came here, and in any case, there just wasn't that amount of time. He says, you're young, take care, because when you get old, it's not that easy, So, in any case, because Geshe-la didn't have the time to go through the text in the manner that he would like, he's brought the text here he's brought the text into the teachings, and so he will be referring to it from time to time and giving us this introduction to the practice of joyous effort. So, Geshe-la will be reading from the text as if he were reading from a newspaper. But please, as listeners, he asks that we not listen to this as if we were listening to somebody reading the newspaper. He would like the things that he says to stick in our minds a little bit better than that.
Okay.
Last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, Geshe spoke a bit about what the nature of joyous effort is. And joyous effort is a delight in virtue, right? And joyous effort is that awareness, that consciousness, that state of mind that delights in virtuous activity.
yete kariyo pati shiba chene nya roa ani delia ngone tose manyo ba chene troi samba tindi chila tendi se yo mato tendi se dikana ya ngando tendi somba da tendi mo sa tendi tense kaga isa ya tendi se ngado nima chi kashe chi da dsa kashe da lo lo tendi chila pe shibji kale jamne a tendi che ate tendi rem tendi se ate ko ti tose manyo ba chene so tomonia ya tose shawala chi techi gugoro yete do peso so hako gugoro o tundu shiba chene ani tose manyo ba ya roi sambade tendi je
So no matter what practice it is that you engage in, joyous effort is very important. But before you engage in something, it's important that we understand the benefits and the advantages of doing it, so that then you engage in that activity with a sense of joyous effort, so that your enthusiasm for the activity does not wane or does not decline in the midst of your doing it. Mm-hmm. Understanding these benefits and advantages are very important. Yeah. Now, this brings to light a certain difference between you making effort on the one hand and having joyous effort on the other. For the word in Tibetan, tsundri, simply means effort or even perseverance. So you can engage in a thing for, week after week, month after month, year after year, and you just kind of plod along doing it. You just persevere at it, right? This is not what we're talking about with joyous effort. Yeah. Rather, here, the joyous effort appreciates the benefits and advantages to the activity that you're engaged in, so that you're engaged in it with a sense of joy, with a sense of delight, which a sense of delight which does not wane. Mm. This is joyous effort.
Okay. What then you say? Then you do that. Then also, and you cheva shego. Then also shito jite shawala ya. Ani then you don't get shego.
Get shego ya.
Let ina ya manzo juso tu then you te geyu sala. Geyu shawala to wa jire mato. Anchika then you tamali ya. Then you mare.
Therefore, we have to make a distinction between perseverance and joyous effort. Now, my interjection as the translator here is something's lost in the translation because, like I said, tsundri in Tibetan, means really perseverance. We translate it as joyous effort. So there's a difference, though, because you can persevere at worldly, mundane activities, can't you? Yeah? That this is quite different from, the joyous effort that is the state of mind that delights in virtuous activities. We're not just talking about persevering, right? Enjoying virtuous activities.
What good today?
How is it that we can engage in our practices with some joyous effort? Well, there are certain techniques that we can use so that we have, so that we bring some joyous effort to our practice. Mm-hmm. What are these types of methods? Well, to reflect on the benefits of joyous effort, working with joyous effort, and the drawbacks of not doing so. What are some of the benefits of working with joyous effort? Well, the final or consummate benefit would, of course, be achieving the state of Buddhahood. But there are many stories about the way that Buddha Shakyamuni himself worked with joyous effort and how he endured hardship with a sense of joy. Mm-hmm. Of course, that allowed him to eventually attain the state of Buddhahood. So likewise, if we're able to work with joyous effort, then we can eventually abandon the different disturbing emotions, the seeds, the imprints of them. In short, abandon all obscurations entirely and come to achieve the states of liberation, the states of omniscience, and so forth. In addition to that, working with joyous effort can produce rebirth as a human, and for instance, in what they call higher status rebirths, so that you can achieve definite goodness, and you can achieve higher status through working with joyous effort. Yeah. Those are some of its effects or results.
개와 깨져 마셔봐지 시당기 깨져 샤바 이나야 말수 로준 전에 추추거네 라장 전에 아니지 센지 배지 로주 제야리야 아니 배 코로 미바요 받지네 너드나 쪼와시네 배 무츠네 아니 로주 제게 당 아니 드리 센지 또 마투 받지네 렐리 왕기 아니 추추거네 로주 제 마투비 맨이 포테 아니 무슨 뭐지 이제 무슨 제가 디가나 배댄스 가가래요 아니 로주 제 마투바 내가 강가 마무치 차이 무도 로주 제 투미들라 꼭 같이나 맞잖아 대신 망하지 래인거 해만도 연유고 손에 아니 셰프
You might wonder, is that true? You might ask, is that true? That such things can come from making joyous effort. And it's the truth of that can be seen in our own experience. So if you simply draw upon some of your life's experience, you will see how it is true. For instance, let's say you don't have to particularly talk about the practice of virtue and so forth, but think about when a child or kids who go to school and get an education. And you have one kid on the one hand who is able to apply him or herself to studies, and he works at the studies, and so eventually they complete their education. And then another child who falls prey to laziness and really isn't able to maintain the study and doesn't keep up with it. So that when it comes to the way they end up living their lives, there's a great difference for the one who was able to apply him or herself to study and the one who did not because of laziness and so forth. They end up leading their lives in very different ways. So you can see the effects of joyous effort even in this example.
Yeah, 어떤 시점에 어떤 일이죠. 근데 일단 먼저 들리세요. 다양한 말이지. 다른 무슨 펜션 도사래. 같은 일 기세 문제서야. 들리 채널에 문제. 그러와 산이셔나야. 산이셔야이나야 들리라. 들리고 손에 안지 예유샤와 루바이나 건 내버려 받지래. 플러치는 거고요. We might think that most of my life is already finished. It's already, now's not the time to have to work with joyous effort. I mean, after all, life is finished. It's too late for me, you might think, but that's not actually the case. Even if you are going to die tomorrow, if you engage in virtue with joyous effort, there are results. Results will come from even starting now, even if you die tomorrow. 아니, 당당한 그룹 부장나리야. 전직 카드들이야. 가르사. 전체 레리션요. 전주 선발이야. 전주 선발한테 전주 세지만 많이 봐. 질세 당에 들어.
어디?
전주 세지만 많이 봐. 질세 타디가나. 질세 타디가나. 아니, 샘리야. 배 쉬우지. 또 니빠 쉬우지 자요.
어디?
가자지 지적이야. 배는 땡기 연애 저기 전주 선배. 전체 지역이 된다. 소소 아니 배 냐이 매그놀로 배. 뭐 tun가 뭔가 내기 좀. 맨노 까버자서 내기 좀.
어디?
어당아 이제 연애 제 투사 말이나 전체 제 투사 말이 너요 된 거야 말. 어떤지 그 도슈지. 네. 전지지 다른 걸 보지 않는 거야. 와.
In the text Guru Puja, they describe the type of attitude that that a bodhisattva with joyous effort has. Now, you become a bodhisattva by developing the mind of enlightenment so much that it's uncontrived, that it's unfabricated. So, by developing an uncontrived mind of enlightenment, you achieve or develop a certain power, a certain ability or potency. And that potency gives you a great deal of strength in working for the benefit of others. For instance, it leads to the attitude that even if I had to remain for hundreds of eons in the fiery hells of Avicii, oceans of eons, even if I had to remain in that type of hell realm, for the sake of a single sentient being, I still would not, I would not give up my compassion, my concern for that being. I would still continue to work for that. That type of attitude comes about.
Also, yeah. 만두 마르스군요. 이들이 해야 셰베이나 가서 만두 인터뷰 아마지요와.
요래.
이거 뭐 레지.
주주레구.
오, 주주레구이다. 그 로르치무 차상 로주셰버와.
로주셰버.
시다. 줘봐. chichipa, the chunipa, Tawakazeo. Tuyone, Queen Tuyone, I should then Nipanua, only if you do a young Lenny, Logicia. I can see interview in I tell her, she can do a test. She was shivity. Senji Wangi, Jelizilla Tawakazeo, Jelizilla Gondalia, Tolosa to the Yamar, has it over it. You know, quite dinner there to
we don't even have to look to texts like Guru Puja for examples of this. We have these in our lives. For instance, on Tuesday, an older woman came for an interview with Geshe. She's 69 years old. And she's done the entire Buddhist Studies program on the Lamrim Chenmo. So this was 6 months last year. Yeah, she was there in October. She was there in November. She was there in December. How hot is it at Chenrezig in these months? And then she's not from Queensland. She's from South Australia. She came back up, end of February for the start of this year's Lamrim Chenmo modules. Yeah. Keep in mind that we don't have air conditioners at the temple at Chenrezig. Think how poor are the conditions at Chenrezig. Yeah. And Geshe asked her in the interview, "Oh, are you understanding the material?" And she says, "No, I don't really understand it, but I'm really enjoying it." Imagine that. I mean, how poor are the conditions there? How old is she? How much hard, everything that she's putting up with. But because she's engaging in the study with a sense of joyous effort, even though she's not understanding the material so well, she's really enjoying it. And that's the power of joyous effort.
Okay?
Joyous effort introduces a sense of delight into the mind. Joyous effort brings happiness to the mind. So that if you can engage in things with the sense of joyous effort, then you might be terribly hot, and you might be tired and working hard. But the joyous effort overrides those things, so that they pale in comparison to the joy that you have in engaging in these things.
Okay?
These are some of the benefits of you're working with joyous effort. Remember some of the benefits of working with joyous effort and the drawbacks of not doing so. And while thinking about these things, then recognize the importance of joyous effort. Yeah. How many types of joyous effort are there then? Now, what are the divisions? Well, the precious Lord Lama Tsongkhapa gives 3 divisions in his text, Lamrim Chenmo. He talks about the armor-like joyous effort, the joyous effort of gathering virtuous dharmas, and the joyous effort of working for the benefit of sentient beings. 3 different types. The first type is armor-like joyous effort. Armor, as in the stuff that a person in the military wears to not be pierced by weapons and so forth. Yeah, so the armor-like joyous effort that we don so that we so that we are not pierced by things like laziness and disturbing emotions, or by a lack of joy, a lack of delight in the virtuous activities that we engage in. So, first understand the benefits and the advantages of the virtuous activity that you're engaging in. Then, with the knowledge of what you gain by doing that, you have a sense of armor, which then prevents that joy from declining. It prevents things like laziness and things like disturbing emotions from weakening the joy that you have in those actions. The armor-like joyous effort.
Okay. 권차이 땐지세한테 땐지가 당연도감 로와 땐지 자지 제한다고 지금 가르에서는 빼는 남도 신년에 제고서는 아니 신년에 전에 편도 가려요 편바 가려요 로와 치기 니빠져버데 치기 니삐 아니 치세한테 생기질 제지다 치기 니빠 세열자예요 뭐야 근데 이 세열이 니빠 가든지 지요래 간단히 지요래 대시바제네 대시나 아니 대 녀래 제발라
The armor-like joyous effort is a precursor to practice. It is as you say, a preparation for practice, a preliminary. So that, if you think, I ought to practice the teachings, well, you ought to understand what the purpose of practicing the teachings is. Now, practicing the Dharma, or the Buddhist teachings, of course, is something that you do with the mind. So it's something that occurs on a mental level. And so, what type of power or potency does practicing the Buddhist teachings give to the mind? So understand what the good things that come from practicing the teachings, so that you know what the purpose, so you know the purpose of what you're doing and what you gain from what you're going to do. So joyous effort, once again, is a way of preparing yourself for the practice of the teachings. Geshe was just describing some of these things, right? He was saying, he presents the issue of what abilities you gain through practicing the Dharma, or what potential lies within the practice of the Dharma. Well, there's things like you can overcome disturbing emotions, you can achieve liberation, you can achieve omniscience, you can achieve these higher status and things like this. There's a potential to achieve all of these things, and these are actually the potential that can be realized through making joyous effort. So understand what can come from making joyous effort.
Understand? So nyole kar chenaya, then nyole te cheni, tanda kar yoba, jabu kar cheju yoba, then shiba chayat kechemo, then never cheni, or quick chigido, naya ten haji chigi isana, then tenji yoba, got it. Copycat chabra.
Yeah.
Data, there's crossover. There's tenji yapo yoma. And this is the social nipadu yet the shiba chene.
No matter what practice you're going to do, you should understand the purpose for that practice, and you should understand the results that come from doing that practice. Otherwise, you're just going to say, like, oh, well, that person's doing it, I want to do that too. But if that's all you're doing, you're not working with joyous effort. You're just being a copycat, aren't you? So rather than just be a copycat, then really understand the benefits and advantages that come from doing something. Understand the purpose of doing that. And then, you can develop joyous effort. Because without that understanding, very difficult to develop joyous effort. Joyous effort cannot, it doesn't have the ground to develop in without that understanding.
Copycat is a big danger. How do you say that?
There's a great danger in just being a copycat, right? Because your mind isn't the same as the other person's mind, is it? So if you then do the same thing that person does, you don't know what's going to come of it, do you? It could actually be quite dangerous.
Isn't it? Oh, did it? Indeed, the Susu Lozu Toma. Susu Lia Techana, Pando Carioba. Susu Chetusa Marve, Tate, Majesty Wall, that's the Payumbre. Susu Chetusa Marve, Chena Pento Cardua, or to the Hakova Chene. That is honor.
You need to figure out what fits with your own mind. Right? And of course, as we'll talk about later, you need to ask questions like, will it be beneficial for me to do this? Yeah? Am I able to do this? Yeah? You really do need to ask these questions. Like, for instance, how much am I able to do? Am I capable of doing this and doing that? And if I am, then is it going to be beneficial? Okay. These are very important issues to address in working with joyous effort. As an outset, yeah. This is the armor-like joyous effort.
Di pedu di bazu hakova chene ani te drupatela gyachi di chitara roa ani senchela senchegi tedru senchelia senchelia pendo ja dodna kana matoa meba chene
ore
kulun zo nombata ba chene chi sosolia nyekunyanda da ani tonyanda de yungre samba de kulun meba chene ne da ne ani tewani ji mo kunyangane ani senchegi tedru ba zo ani senche teje chitara tanda.
Then you have the joyous efforts of gathering virtuous dharmas and the joyous effort of working for the benefit of sentient beings. Now these refer to the sense of joyous effort that actually accompanies the practices that you engage in. So you figure out which of the, if you're going to practice generosity or practice ethics or practice patience, etc. And you figure out the type of practice that fits with your mind, and then you engage in that with the sense of delight. This is, for instance, the joyous effort of gathering virtuous dharmas. The joyous effort of working for the benefit of sentient beings, part of that also is, as Geshe mentioned, is engaging in those activities with an understanding of the benefits and the abilities that those practices imbue you with. So then you have the joyous effort of working for the benefit of sentient beings. So you engage in what you do. You engage in things that help other sentient beings without incurring misdeeds. That's an important phrase. So without acting in an inappropriate more literally, without incurring misdeeds, you work for the benefit of sentient beings. So you, motivated by the mind of enlightenment, you do different things for the sake of sentient beings, the joyous effort of working for the sake of sentient beings. These latter two types of joyous effort we refer to the joyous effort that accompanies our activities, our practices. Yeah?
Okay. Manzo, since Jelia, Pento Jedikanlia, since Jelia, Pento Jedikala, since tell me Pento Jana, cook gun over it, cook Mala Gabucha over it, cook Mala Gavere, or Jenda Sosolia Terra Tangere. There's two kini, and in Jana Pento Chavaina, got this, since the Sosola Gamagana, Ania, Sosu, or Galejaba, Temechizo, Gamaiba child. Yan Jenda Terra Matona, Yan Sosolia, Garsaguru. Susu Joa non da Maike Soil, Roa, Soso Absati Chayangurua. The G is a Tindical Noyo Mapa, Ganaega, Magana Maga, Nicola Pento Chetsuna, Michigi, Magana Maga, Roa, Genji Teratuna to Meritanata, Ni Munitan Hasumada, or those Jenny, de Chavaina, so means that at Chadia, Genji Teratuna Matonada, Parode Gadomarga, Magana, Roa, or Tindical Monimando.
So with the joyous effort of working for the benefit of sentient beings, it's important that you have a pure motivation for what you're doing. Not working for material gain or honor, not working for others so that they may praise you and to avoid being insulted and so forth. Because it can happen, can it, that when you do something for the sake of another person, that you might do it So, you might do it so that they like you, right? But you find that once you do that, whatever it is, that they don't actually like you. And then, it can become non-virtuous, can it? Or, for instance, if you set out to do something so that person would then begin to think well of you, and they don't end up thinking well of you, then this activity that you've engaged in, it backfired, didn't it? So rather than engage, in things so that people like you or to make them think well of you, whether they like it, would they end up liking you or not, yeah? From your own side, try and develop a proper attitude. Whether they praise me or insult me, I have a good attitude in genuinely trying to help this person. Because otherwise you get upset, don't you? So rather than do this, work for the benefit of sentient beings without incurring misdeeds, and with the highest intention, with a pure motivation to genuinely help them, regardless of what their response. It's important that jobs like nursing, being a doctor, being a teacher, that we engage in these things with a pure motivation. And Geshe says a teacher, like a school teacher. Yeah, because then whether the students, for instance, like what you do or don't like what you do, like you or don't like you. Now, still, from your side, you're doing it with a good motivation. So whether they like it or not, there's still virtue being accomplished, right? Because you're doing it with the right motivation. Yeah? So it's very important that we do these things with the good motivation, regardless of the response. We have the same situation here as well. Geshe is here to teach the Dharma. But whether or not what he does becomes the Dharma depends on his motivation. Yeah? So that if he's able to do it with the right motivation, wishing to help you, then what he does is the Dharma. But if he were to, for instance, think that, if I teach them the Dharma, then they're going to respect me and they're going to praise me, then what he does wouldn't be the Dharma. The things that he's explaining would be the Dharma, but his activities wouldn't be the Dharma. So it's the same thing. Whether or not what he does, even in this situation, becomes Dharma or depends on his motivation.
Okay?
When working for the sake of others, do so with a good motivation, the highest intention for their sake. And that way, you won't have the problems and the difficulties that can come along in working for the sake of others. Without that positive motivation, then people can give you the impression that they don't really appreciate what you're doing or they don't like what you're doing, which can upset you, right, if you don't have the right motivation. So we all right with these three types of joyous effort? We need to understand these well. You've got the armor-like joyous effort, then you've got the joyous effort of gathering virtuous dharmas, and the joyous effort of working for the benefit of sentient beings. Yeah, actually engaging in things with joyous effort.
That's usually 땡지 야보 용약을 쳐도 아니 타 땡지 야보 셔야 타 지송사 대 대지대 만도 시바전에 로아
어디?
타 될이야 타도 셔봐라 저순이 배나 땡지가 개 같이 뽑아다 직접 분기 초사봐도 대니나 때니 아니 또 땡지 좀 봐. 솔로마사. 너는 대니나 땡지 좀 봐.
어디?
아니 델리 아니 리도 셀렉스로 아니 세 라지 레룸 차리 거래 사실
시
제수자 대지 나잖아
Now that we understand the benefits of working with joyous effort, then we look at how we can make sure that our joyous effort develops properly, so that it comes along well. So Lama Tsongkhapa addresses 4 points in this regard. So 4 points on how to make one's joyous effort really good. So the first one is to get rid of the circumstances that adverse circumstances. The second one is to gather circumstances that are conducive to what you're doing, as they say, gathering the accumulations. The third one is, after having given up adverse circumstances and gathered together the positive circumstances, then you not fervently, but you diligently engage in things with joyous effort. And finally, how, by going through those steps, that you achieve this workability of this workability or flexibility of body and mind. Yeah? Four basic points.
Okay. 같은 땡지 사실에 맞도 시도만도 친여를 가르쳐놔야 되려와. 친여를 가르쳐놔야 치 랑이 치 녀서 레자디기 치디가 아니 같이 좀 봐.
그래.
아니 티체를 가르고도 와. 네. 티체 초사.
그래.
그러와. 아니 대니 순제체네. 순제도 토네.
그래.
치 녀를 미스 주. 그러와.
그래.
아 달라지는 점이 있어요.
This is a division found in the context of joyous effort, but actually it's a general model that can be applied to practicing, anything related to the teachings, isn't it? I mean, after all, if you're going to engage in the practice of something, then first you want to make sure that you have destroyed or overcome the circumstances that work in opposition to what you're trying to do, overcoming adverse circumstances. And then you want to gather together the conditions that are conducive to your aims, gathering the accumulations and so forth. Then, after having integrated those two, then you diligently pursue whatever practice it is that you've chosen. And then finally, there are the results that come from doing those things.
이제 다 전부 땡지가 같이 뽕바텔랑 같이 미주와당 그러와 아니 대품비 타템바 니제.
So here, look at giving up the adverse circumstances, hindrances. There is first an identification of what is an adverse circumstance, what is a hindrance to joyous effort, and then looking at the ways to abandon or give those up.
근데 땡지를 잡아놓은 지 가서 친여를 잡고 왔다. 반대만도 땡지여를 잡아라. 개 먼저쇼대 니스마치 하고. 아니 대포한 거로 와. 네. 니 마스는 아주 본식이 말아.
Once again, these are points that need to be applied to our practice of joyous effort. Right? First, we need to identify what is a hindrance or obstacle to joyous effort, right? Then once we've recognized what stands in opposition to joyous effort, we need to work on abandoning or giving that up. Yeah, this is very important. And this can then be applied to other practices as well. Yeah? So that first you recognize what is incompatible with the practice that you're pursuing. Yeah? and then you work at getting rid of that. Yeah? No matter what practice it is you're engaged in.
다만도 녀랭이슬라 주발라 아니 바체 가리아르사나 녀레 가리이나야 아오 땅에 저 니바 토용 저 니바 토용 아니 달라 문주바
어레
아 대자와 저 가라니ኞ도 신비원기 야 아니 달라 문주바 리니요 저 니바 토나요 문주바 당이 저 니사 말했어네 문주바 리니요 gotcha.
When engaging in a particular practice, there are two hindrances that might come into play. Two main ones, at least. The first is that even though you see that you're capable of accomplishing the thing, even though you see that you're capable of doing the practice, you don't end up doing it. You don't engage in it. One. Two, that you're beset by the thought, oh, am I really capable of doing that? So that you end up shrinking away from the activity. Maybe you even say you're a bit discouraged. Yeah? So, two things. Yeah? First of all, even though you see that you're capable of doing it, you don't engage in it. You don't pursue it. Second of all, the thought, this discouragement or shrinking away from the activity with the thought, am I really capable? So when you see that you have the ability to do something, but you don't pursue it, there are different things that might be at play here. First one is that you might think, oh, well, there's always time to do it later, so you procrastinate. The first one is procrastination. And the second one is maybe being sort of led away by inferior activities, so that you get wrapped up in lesser activities and you don't engage in the more significant or vital one. Yeah, procrastination, getting wrapped up in inferior or lesser actions. What if you fall prey to procrastination, thinking that, oh, I can always do it later, there's always time to do it tomorrow? What if you have this procrastination? What do? Well, then you can think about certain topics that were taught in the stages of the path that are shared with persons of small capacity. Think about a human life with leisures and opportunities. Think about different things like how meaningful it can be, how difficult it is to find. These types of topics. The great meaning and the rarity of a human life with leisures and opportunities. Then you can also think about, and what about after death? If, after I die, I were to fall into a miserable realm, it would be a great shame. It would be a real tragedy. So you think about death and impermanence. Think about these type of topics to overcome the tendency to procrastinate and put things off.
Okay. Desum doa. Manzo ta kala chechogore nyombe. Shisho dig. Dem gupi chat. Ani chawama ta ba chamba ta. Ani ka ngenrol
인간적으로
인간 중간 잠바다.
음.
그러와
음.
한 자가는 준비 단다 지가 사.
텐션.
대니까 어때? 전도 소노 따니 아니 쉬쉬고.
So if you find yourself thinking that, oh, yeah, I'll do it over time, gradually, I'll get to it, then 3 things that you can think about to stop that. Okay, you can think about death and impermanence. You can think about the sufferings that are found in the lower realms and the prospect of your taking such a rebirth. And you can think about the difficulty of finding the leisures and opportunities and the things that go along with that.
다 뒤줄이야. 샤왕 멤버를 잡아. 샤왕 멤버를 잡아. 샤왕 멤버. 샤왕 멤버를 잡아.
No.
샤왕 멤버 자디 델리아 저는 뭐 저거 아니 도비치 갈때 뭐로 너드나 치기 년에 되라 치기 년에 다 치만이 비샤와 치기 샤와도 치만이 비샤와 니자
Right.
샤왕 멤버 세야데 치만이 비샤와 너드나 로와 치만이 비샤위 제가 가리요와 치기 샤와티 제가 가리요와 너드나 상관도 또도 렌저를 또 구비해서 이 수문도 되나 이거와
Right.
렌저를 손으로 담아이나 만수치 레 샤왕 멤버 무게위 제가 가리요와 아니 기운 제가 가리요와 뒤쪽으로 야손을 담아이나 샤왕 멤버 참 샤왕 멤버 라테 고코야테 안 보이는
The second possible hindrance would be to get wrapped up in lesser or inferior activities. So this is becoming attached to lesser or inferior activities. So here the inferior activities refer to, for instance, non-dharma activities. You've got dharma activities and non-dharma activities. So you must think about what are the results that I get from engaging in non-dharma activities, and what are the results that I get from engaging in dharma activities. Although it doesn't say so explicitly, really here we must think about karma and its effects, actions and their effects, as we have to think about the different things, activities that we might engage in, and think about what comes from that. What are the results that I gain from one and the other?
Nganzu tachi ranjig mgewi ri leka yina na kakar de mato marusu nimachi nija chi so leka kar chege yana ya de ani so kono ngene yapo chona ani chama gewal jije yota esani rawa
Geshe oftentimes brings this up. Many of you might have heard it before. Well, first of all, when you're dealing with an action that is non-virtuous by nature, that's another situation. That's a different story. Right? Other than those type of things, basically anything you do throughout the 24 hours of a day, if done with the right motivation, can be a dharma action, a dharma activity, can't it? So long as you're doing it with the right motivation, and it doesn't fall into this other category, everything that you do can be done. Right? In fact, this was referred to earlier in the text, the second verse, which reads, "Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence." Geshe actually made reference to this before. That, generally speaking, this can be read as saying that you can work at these types of actions and practices both day and night. But there's something else to that as well, and that in the time between those efforts, even when you're sleeping, if you engage in that, before going to sleep with a positive motivation, then even the act of sleep can help you to take the essence and really be engaging in virtue. So with the right motivation, even the action of sleep, to say nothing of the other things you might do throughout the day, can become virtuous.
Okay? Or do the sonotani, Mandu, Garsaguru, Chawang Yambala, Shambate, Kani, Roa, Chawang Boria, Chawang Yichileloka. That's it. Chawang Yambala should be Lelo Tetan, Shushochilelo Te Niga, Mars Niba Tonayo, and the Jubala Pachicha. Or death, they need each other.
Well, this is one way that you can overcome our clinging to the inferior activities, right? So these 2 points, procrastination on the one hand, and getting wrapped up and getting lost in, you might say, lesser activities, are hindrances. Hindrances that make you not engage in practice, even though you see that you're capable of doing so. Yeah.
That is you smart this. That is it. Ji Lubam. That doesn't it. Danila Niba Asen. Roa. Danila Niba City. Oh, that Nagabu. Nigabareno.
Oh, it.
Ani. Sema Shimni. Majubate. Then
the third hindrance would be this type of laziness where you shrink away from actions, or type of laziness where you don't give yourself enough credit, or that you look down on yourself, right? So, for instance, if you're looking down on yourself, you're thinking something like, oh, somebody like me isn't capable of doing that. Right, that's looking down on yourself. Oh, I'm not. Someone like me isn't capable of this. Yeah. So this is sometimes, there's different aspects to this. Looking down on yourself, is the one that's just been emphasized, or shrinking away from the action.
소소 시바시아바이나 토자유 산지주 공부 토나 송고요.
그래.
산지주 공부 해야 되다. 내라고 여서 말에 깔래 먹고 자고 여서래. 안만도 보지 토 니야지래 문두면도 또는 담바이나. 근데 수수지래야. 진짜 판정이 있다는 게 산지주 공부 토바 저기 년비. 아니 세세 대녀용고요. 알아. 소바 대녀용고요.
그래.
진짜 할래비. 이제 손을 단지요 말에.
This is actually a great mistake, this one. Particularly if you're practicing the mind of enlightenment, right? This type of discouragement is a great mistake. You might even say fault. Because think about it. Let's say that you become discouraged and thereby shrink away from the thing that you're trying to attain, which for a person who's practicing the mind of enlightenment is Buddhahood, right? So this type of discouragement would be to think that, I don't think I have what it takes to achieve enlightenment. Okay? And if you begin to think that, I don't have what it takes to achieve enlightenment, perhaps I don't have what it takes to achieve enlightenment, then the wish to achieve enlightenment, the wish to become a Buddha, is declining. It's waning, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this, in particular, allowing that wish to achieve enlightenment because you question whether you're able, okay, is actually a great fault. Something to really be aware of. What is the remedy for this type of discouragement, shrinking away? Think about what the Buddha taught. That the Buddha said that all sentient beings, down to the smallest insect, can become Buddhas. He said that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. they are of the type that can become Buddhas. That the only that the mind of a sentient being and the mind of a Buddha are different insofar as our minds are obscured by stains, and theirs are not. But other than that, they're the same, and that we can also remove those stains and become Buddhas. So of course, I have the ability to become a Buddha. But the Buddha taught on all of these things, saying that each and every one of us can become Buddhas. So you think about these points to reassure yourself that you do indeed have the ability, you do indeed have the potential for that.
Meganola, or didn't you call Shivere Salnaya, Korahamagoaji, didn't you? But indeed, don't do not visit Chuju to Zolo Tamina, Mazu Pet, Halendua. And the Zoya Sanji Yona, but it's also Sanji never had it. So Zoya, and I'm not jail. So Zoya, we get Kumbado, Mido Masuna, Paya and Nibajios. Yes, Kumbado Masuna, Midoji Paya to Taguar. Jitaja to Taguar Matojibi, or that Meninobi, Kondo Chipachili dead, no Chamboro.
So Buddha said that even the smallest insects can become Buddhas. And from our perspective, if you think about a little insect, I mean, they're really stupid, aren't they? I mean, they're just walking closer and closer to a fire. They're going to get burned, but they keep going. They don't stop. They just go right into the fire, I mean, that's stupid, right? From our perspective, we look at that and we see that there's a great difference between us and insects. And if they can become Buddhas, then why can't I? So that you think, we're humans, yeah? We have the ability to think about things. We have intelligence, and we have to, now that we've got this great opportunity, lay a cornerstone, lay the foundation. Like for a house, you have a cornerstone, right? Something to begin with. Start to put in this foundation so that eventually you can build upon it and really achieve this full state of a Buddha. Mm-hmm. And that now that we have the opportunities to start laying the foundation for it, if we were to just pass our time doing nothing that any animal can't do, that would be a great shame, wouldn't it? Because there is a great difference in what's available to us at the moment, so we need to make the most of it.
Okay?
If you can use this opportunity of having a human body to lay a foundation, then from that comes a sense of hope. From that comes a sense of joyous effort, right? Because once you've been able to get a start, you begin to find the hope that you can continue and then you can make progress. But unless you get that start, then you have no hope. There's no sense of being able to do it. So that's why it's so important now that we have the chance to make that start, yeah, and really begin to work with joyous effort.
Sonja Korolia and Chavachaka Yamara.
Yamari.
Mazeba Chicken Koroga, Lava Longinica, Lonioligenia, Hashima. Zosungumare, Sugue Yamare, Taranajimbi, Sumba de Koro, Yonu Son the Sumbi Aramasojibi, Korope, Bambolini, Valia letting, Minia Juni, Masunkeji, Netsukaro, Jamaretani, Otu Jenny, Shimbaka, Ketchaboy.
The Buddha didn't lie. I mean, he had no need to lie. I mean, what difference does it make to him whether he tells us that all sentient beings can achieve Buddhahood or not? I mean, he doesn't stand to gain by that. What's more is that the Buddha spent time training in the path himself. Yeah. The Buddha didn't lie. The Buddha isn't served by lying about this. Yeah? And I mean, if it were somebody who hadn't actually traversed and progressed along the path, I mean, that would be one thing. But that's not the case. A Buddha has actually gone through it. And coming out the other end says that everyone has the ability to become Buddhas.
마루도 카미 야다 제사 전주 선바데 전주 선바데 소가 아니 배 소소 레야 짐바도니 아니 배 두스 지위아래 오당가 진지 제투 미스리 제투고 말해 년다 탑라 아니지 짐바샤 용도 누나 그러와 오 마루소 리 짐바톤세야 두즈제데 코르티 산초야 내니께 자레 마도 집이 산초를 말레 코는 만들 리 짐바토 추고예요 말
오래
그러와
오래
리 짐바토 추사들레디 말도 두개치 차이고요. 이때가 또 그거야 할때 또 나야 아니지 깡가요 말.
Those are the kind of things that we think about and do if we begin to become discouraged about what we're, the goal, what we're trying to attain. We might also become discouraged about the methods that are used to achieve that goal. Right? For instance, for us, Bodhisattvas are the role model. The people that we look up to and try and emulate are bodhisattvas. And bodhisattvas give up their bodies, in order to achieve, the goal and so forth. And we might think that, I couldn't give up my body, like the bodhisattvas who are meant to emulate can. But at that point it's important to remember that there's a point that you reach when you're able to give away your body. And until you reach that point, you're not allowed to give up your body. So you might think that, you might begin to feel discouraged about the methods required to achieve Buddhahood, because you look at what these bodhisattvas are doing and think, I couldn't do that, I couldn't give up my body. But you must remember that once you reach that point where it's permissible to do so, then at that point you're also able to do so. So once you're allowed to do it, you will be able to do it. And then you can actually, you're in a position to do it. So remember this, if you begin to feel discouraged, that before you reach that point, you're not meant to do it. And when you reach that point, you will well and truly be able to do it.
아니 소소 리라 차비 차방 걸 그러와 내니 수제 마조나 리지마 또 묻혔어 수제 세를 말해나 아니 리지마 또 추 말했어요.
When you reach that point, you have reached a certain point in your familiarity with compassion. Your compassion has reached a certain level, and you've also overcome a great deal of your attachment towards your own body. So, and that because you have that high degree of compassion and a lack of attachment to one's own body, then you're in a position, or then you're permitted to give away your body. Then the Buddha says, okay, now that you've reached this point, you're able to give away your body, and so you're allowed to. Yeah.
Understand? 식단이 먼저 짐바땅 투도 무투 세야때 차발을 하래 용도와. 차피 리토서나 가리나야 만두 짐바또 투바지 만두 뇨뇨로.
Generally speaking, whether or not a person is able to give something depends on whether or not, how attached they are to it. Yeah? If you can let go of your attachment to the thing, then you can give it. You're able to give it away, right?
Understand?
So generally, the ability to give is linked to attachment.
두스레. 근데 이즈다니 데라. 근데 소노다니. 너도나 심바 데라야 토제 타라. 언요레 제투고 말했어나 아니 심바시고 말해. 코. 단단 맞추나야. 투비 깝지 용거래. 아니 디디 가라요? 아니 배 거로 갈쪽으로 강남에가 차인 거래.
This is what you think if you begin to feel discouraged about the methods that are required to achieve the goal, what you want. Yeah? You might think then, that's difficult, I'm not able to do that. But then remember that even if I'm not able to do so right now, there will come a time when I am able. Yeah? And at that point, I'll do it.
네, 근데 제가 선택을 때 쉬우지 두고 Gandhi Tani, Sinju de Chanya Dugore. Then just to Ion yonder, yeah? Jubinella, Shimbashen, Roa, Tapa Sinja Duma Hoya, and Shawaleni, and Sinju de Duguel. Nothing due to Ion yonder, son of Zambaina, yeah, and it got the Gorobo. Due to Gore. Carolesana, Dipa Marusu said, should you say Chiba Maiba Chan, two the same day, Gavishum Bashila Layla. Say Gavishum Bashila Lay with the color, and it Magavi second bed. That poor man I am, Gado. Gaba is a Duma Yamar. Carolesana, Dipa Ocean, Gavame, Alcasa, Dumame, Dipa Ocean, Dumame. Capishana Magame. Since do Talan, Kappa is an and Kava, since you there to Sashana and Magawa. The proportion
Magame. You might also begin, so you might become discouraged about achieving the goal. You might become discouraged about the methods required to achieve that goal. And thirdly, you might become discouraged about the abodes or the places where that you find yourself in while trying to achieve that goal. Right? So you think you're committing yourself to working for the benefit of all sentient beings, the countless sentient beings, is working for their benefit, and that of course in doing so you have to take rebirth, or you end up taking rebirth a number of times, and you sometimes end up in very miserable places, and you think that you begin to shrink away from the place, where you work for sentient beings. But that's when it's important to remember that the more that we begin to cultivate virtuous states of mind, the more happiness there is. And that even if you haven't completely abandoned non-virtuous states of mind, the more that you cultivate the positive ones, that these non-virtuous minds stop. So that there isn't the suffering involved. As is quoted in the text, it says that because you have abandoned negativities, there is no suffering. Because you are skillful or knowledgeable, there is no dislike. So that because you've given up negativities which cause suffering, there is no longer that suffering that accompanies the hard work and being in the places where you do that hard work. And because you're skillful and knowledgeable about the proper way to work for the sake of others, you know the benefits of it, you know what comes of it, then there's no sense of dislike for that. You understand the value of what you're doing, and so you don't dislike it. You really enjoy it. Hence, because you have given up negativities, there is no suffering. Because you are skillful and knowledgeable, there is no dislike. So even though you have to take rebirth and you're in these places working for the benefit of others, there's no suffering. There's happiness. So you don't need to be discouraged about being in those places, because as we develop these things, there's more happiness and less suffering. Nothing to be discouraged about.
Tashi so sapa sayate juma Geshe woman. But this is the time. This Sunday, I told the Shavi, and I was touching knowledge, Sananda, Mr. Tendo Dambachi Yuala, and she Tenji Ketchum Moresha. The later, I sent the sauce, Maruta, Chetuna, Matuna, Ayuchi, Ayumayuba. I have a church. The little Geshe, Senatos, Keda.
No. With joyous effort, then today we've focused on the overcoming or giving up the adverse circumstances, the hindrances to joyous effort. Next week we can talk about gathering the conducive circumstances, gathering the accumulations, because it looks like time is about up, right? So Geshe was just saying that in leading a happy life, leading a meaningful life, joyous effort is very important. So let's not, consider or think like, am I able to work with joyous effort or am I not able? Rather, just do as much as you can. And work with joyous effort as much as you are able to. Yeah. And next week we'll talk about how to gather together the conducive circumstances. Yeah?
Okay. Enjoy it.
Do you have any questions? Or 2 weeks from now? Any questions?
Geshe was talking about the risk of believing that we may not be able to become or reach Buddhahood, or that we were not capable. So is there a risk of being the opposite, overly optimistic and thinking that we are at this stage? I mean, if we've lived so many different lives, but we can't remember, we don't know to which level of development we have achieved. And therefore we may go and try everything. We might want to take every initiation that's available, and be overly excited about it. And perhaps we are not quite there yet. We have to do a lot of other steps. Is there a risk of that? Or
Geshe talked about being discouraged by the thought of not being able to achieve the goal. Is it possible that the opposite might also be true, and that you're over-optimistic, you overestimate your ability? We don't know what level of development we're at, where we are in terms of, we've taken life many times, could be quite advanced, but we don't know. So is it possible that someone could get carried away and take every empowerment that's on offer and end up, also creating difficulties for oneself? Yeah. Topja du mini nyamya chi yorwa shimba chi yorwa dela di nyanga chikche de dosho ki samlo the nyanga yosigi de besa pena nga thoma me bane shawa chi len thabare sa mune nga sem gi nyama khatse yakita thon tusi ti nga shingi yomar wasa 진짜나 근데 이렇게 돈서 할래야 통보지 레시기래 이네양 같은 소소소소 뉴체데 도서 화부럽다네 나 뉴바 전부여 삼네 근데 왕 거드나니 왕드니 슈가도 근데 도스 담보니네 뉴체데 화부럽다네 유마 강가테 시기래 베스 대 년가 요어 베스
배년가요 이거তে 진짜 그 초사반으로 맛있게 쳤지용 그래. 다 난도나 이제 얘는 내 가리나 투구요 사야돼. 쇼다 개천벌. 이나야 관여를 제야 돼. 소소 미 당기 개체 또 써요 봐. 소소로도 처음에 누가 다시 제야. 소소 대 빼나 당자도 보지 캘레도 보지 제샤바 이나 아니 따따 레사 레벨 말해. 대 따지 제거 얼마도 대 따지 맞게 맞지니 두그래서는 대체잖아요. 하루 해년가요. 진짜 만두대 시바죠.
We will address this a bit more when we talk about gathering the conducive circumstances, conducive conditions. But just to say a bit now, generally it's important to have the attitude that I'm capable, that I can do what I set my mind to doing. Generally that's important. But as Geshe was saying, it's also very important that you really investigate a practice before you take it on. Checking it out to see, does this actually fit my mind? Okay, what are the commitments involved in this? And am I capable of keeping those commitments? Is this appropriate for me? Is this suitable to my mind? If we aren't careful and don't, you go through this process of investigation first, then yes, there certainly are dangers of proceeding, doing something that, or not living up to it later and so forth. So yes, indeed, there are such dangers. That's why it's so important to really investigate something before you take it on. It's very important. Yeah, we need to do what is fitting for us, appropriate to our minds, which is sort of what Geshe was getting at earlier when he was saying, lay a foundation.
Okay?
Any questions? If there are no questions, then perhaps we'll leave it there. Time is up.
Yeah. Okay. I think under the Karsa, Shitama chose to Varia Union Ruche, meditation that Nichiria, or the Zoo Solia. Karsago. The group chaining, I Parbarulia discuss that, Parbarulia meditation. To the Chedicania, Ya, Shiva Party, Javaina, Marus Tandato Sabana, whatever you are.
Hori.
Indeed, Samaria, Jimachi Jim Mebaisa, that is all can chest. Indeed, Ketchu Karisana, what is Zasachi in the Sonotani? And so loyal, Chusechi Tola. Roa, Lodu, Sabachi Tolia, Chajani, Anchi. Kind of say, Yajita Atu Tario. Matu Gipi say, so to Techi, so to look Totechi, Machevachi, he can't get Tolia, Anchi Carrete, Pati Dolice, Anchi Sebo Marevache. The need he told your so some noise, so to Toba Della Pachiche. Nita, just to other charities. It is Mifi of the Shakashara in Mamma. Then Nada which charge away, Machina, Tatare, Loma, Logic, just another Karchina, Karchevina, Roa, I Hondo, Yat, Tanda, Septam Gitarioma, Geshe Sayoma, Data, and Sazatene. So, the Tombate, Tara, and Marichistan, Yakuzo chief, and they are messages.
So, many of you come to the center a couple times, so many times a week even, getting together with the groups, doing meditation, doing different things, which is very good. But it might be, you attend meditation. Sometimes you want to attend meditations. You want sometimes discuss some issues. Do the different things. But as you do so, you might find that sometimes it gets a bit much. I mean, after all, we're pretty new to this, aren't we? So we might end up having problems from time to time. So Geshe would just encourage us to work out, first of all, what is fitting for us as individuals. So what is appropriate to our own minds. After all, work out what you're capable of. And then you can address things as they go along, rather than get a little bit too keen, so that you don't really ask yourself, what am I capable of? You don't really ask yourself what fits with me, but you just simply jump into something, or you launch into something and end up having trouble with that later. So Geshe was saying that Eddie and Miffy are actually still relatively new to this. I mean, they're not that old in as far as this goes. Geshe, this is another story. Even if he doesn't know how to respond to a particular thing, or doesn't know what's the answer or whatever. He's he's studied a great deal, and he's in a position to deal with the situation as it comes up. Miffy and Eddie, they haven't become Geshes yet, have they? So just be aware of that. You take it at your own level. Work out what your level is, and proceed on that basis. Work out what fits with you, and do what you can. Otherwise, you can have trouble. So that's just a special bit of advice. Geshe, is happy, of course. It encourages us to meditate and discuss and all these other things, but also be aware of these other issues. Something special for Langri Tampa. What Geshe is basically saying is, look, don't torment Miffy and Eddie, Don't harass them, you might say.
Okay?
really make an effort to make your lives meaningful. Try and do what you're capable of, and apply these things. One thing Geshe said that I neglected to translate was that we're here to improve our minds, to develop our minds, aren't we? Always keep that thought that, hey, we're here to develop our minds. So we need to work out what our ability is and what suits us. So as Geshe was just saying, that if we do what we're capable of, then slowly over time, then we find a greater sense of peace, a greater sense of happiness. Things turn out well. Thank you.